You are listening to the Total Access Radio Show.
Thanks for tuning in to the Total Access Radio Show. I am your host, Steve Ornest, here with my co-host, Blake Baldwin. We are broadcasting live from my recording studio, Total Access Recording in Redondo Beach, California. Whether you're listening to us on KLBP FM or Spotify or watching us on YouTube, thank you for joining us. Blake and I are music producers and songwriters with one question in mind. What songs inspire the artists we love to listen to? This is a show made by music makers, meant for everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Total Access Radio Show. I am your host, Steve Ornest.
And I am kind of your host today, Blake Baldwin.
That's right. We're joined here with Stu and Blake's doggy, June. We are here with Hand Drawn Maps. Love these guys. So a little bit about them first off. Hand Drawn Maps is an indie rock duo from the South Bay in Los Angeles. The band was started by lifelong friends Blake Baldwin and Stuart Crichton. The two create a unique sound that draw from classic 1960s psychedelia and surf rock. Often drawing on their personal histories for inspiration, the lyrics bounce from themes of idyllic love to drug use and past forays with altered states of consciousness, all while dancing over a gritty rhythm section. I'd like to kick the show off with one of my personal faves. This one is called Everybody Knows. That was Everybody Knows, Hand Drawn Maps. Welcome to the studio, Blake and Stuart. How we doing, guys?
Dude, doing great. Thank you for having us, bro.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for being here. I miss you a little bit, Blake, being on the other side of the room, but I can't can't lie. I kind of like the space a little bit over here too.
Oh, okay. I see how it is.
Yeah.
I'm in the hot seat today.
You are in the hot seat.
No, I love it. Always a good day over here at Total Access Recording Studios.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that
Love
song everybody knows. I know I've told you guys this story, but one of my my earliest music memories is when I was like 3. Must have been about 3.5 years old, growing up in New York, and there was this vinyl shop in Queens that my dad used to go to. And randomly one day he took me and said, "You can pick out anything that you want." So I just walked like straight ahead and was like looking at the album artwork. And you can imagine for like a 3-year-old kid seeing this wall of vinyl, you're just like, oh my God, this is so cool and so immersive. And you're looking at the colors. And for whatever reason, I got Get Off My Cloud by the Rolling Stones. And
That's a banger.
yeah, and listen to it just like nonstop. And there's something about how I remember feeling when I heard that song and just like listened to it on repeat that this reminds me of. It's just, I think it's like the...
We'll take it.
Yeah, dude. Oh, dude. Absolutely. I can speak for both Blake and myself just saying that we were so influenced by like the old 60s songs, Stones, Beatles, all that stuff. We don't really incorporate that in like the playlist today. We're kind of leaning more towards like a modern music, like bands that are working today.
Sure.
Maybe lesser known artists, but that and the 60s whole genre is just so enveloped in what we do. Like that's such a compliment.
Yeah, both Stuart and I, like we did grow up together, and so we went on like all these family vacations, because our dads were like best friends, and our moms were equally like best friends.
Oh, it's so cool.
So when we'd go on camping trips, like the soundtrack was like all the classic rock stuff you could think of. Stones, Beatles.
Is there any Beach Boys in there?
Beach Boys, Doors.
Definitely.
I mean, God, the list is
The
endless.
Who,
The Who,
everything.
the Eagles.
Oh, all of it.
My dad wasn't necessarily a musician per se. He could play a little guitar and sing a little bit. Stuart's pops was a bit more of a talented guitar player. But some of my first musical memories are of them like jamming and like hanging out and just like singing us goofy songs. They always would like make up. I don't know if you remember this, Stuart, but they would always make up like goofy songs of us, like about the kids, like 2 little kids running around the kitchen floor, like like seriously, just like off the cuff, like random joke songs.
Yeah, it's awesome. I was a little young at that point. Blake's a
Yeah.
tiny bit older than me, so
Yeah.
my memory's not as clean, but those are my first memories also, just camping, sitting around the campfire with guitars, and nothing beats that. Like,
Absolutely.
that's
So
the way
were you guys playing at that point too, or contributing by singing along, or not quite yet?
I was sort of mesmerized actually by it because, well, one, your dad was like a good guitar player. So he was like the first person I remember, like I was watching him play guitar and being like, whoa, like that's a crazy skill to have. But then they would be singing Beatles songs and they'd actually be like nailing the harmonies together, the two of them, because they were both like music heads.
Yeah.
So they actually kind of worked it out. I don't know. My memory is probably like rose-colored glasses. Like I'm sure, those harmonies are hard on those Beatles tracks. So I'm
They
sure
are,
someone was
yeah.
butchering something somewhere. But still, as a little
Come on,
kid,
Dad.
I was like, wow, like that's so cool. Like two guys harmonizing, playing guitar. Then look at us all these years later actually doing the same thing. Must be pretty crazy for our dads to think about us playing music together.
Yeah. I mean, it sounded good to me at the time, so
Yeah.
even if those harmonies were a little off, I didn't notice.
Screw you, Dad. Your harmony's wrong.
Come on, Dad.
Dad, you're
Work on that
flat.
third. So at that point, you guys were just friends, growing up together, listening to music.
Yeah.
Had you started, when did you actually start playing music then, Stu?
Well, I started. My dad bought me a guitar when I was like 6 or 7, and I didn't really take it seriously at all. He would show me like, Stu, play a G, and I'd like arrange my hands. I'd be like, yeah, like just easy like that. I didn't start taking it seriously until I was about 13. I just remember I was like, I want to do something like this with my life, and everything just kind of went out the window. I started playing guitar, started taking lessons, started getting more serious about it, and started writing my own songs. I've always written my own songs.
Fairly early on, you started writing your own songs?
Fairly early on, since I picked up a guitar, I just started making stuff up because, I mean, I would learn cover songs. I'd be like bored halfway through them. Like I'm like, I don't want to play this anymore, and I'd just start experimenting with my own chords, making up my own lyrics, and most of this was god awful, by the
Right,
way,
sure.
for a long time. I didn't write anything that was remotely anywhere near good for maybe 10 years, maybe longer. So,
What about you, Blake?
Like my musical history.
Yeah, I mean,
Basi-
I knew you in high school, and I
Yeah.
for some reason feel like at that point maybe just because I was so in my own world of just doing what I was doing, playing guitar, I don't remember you playing or singing much yet. And when I found out a few years after that you were doing that, I was like, no way. Well, let me hear something. And I listened to something you did and was blown away. So when did that happen?
Well, you and I connected on music early on, like, freshman, sophomore year of high school or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you had been playing guitar a little more seriously, like longer at that point. And I had just been getting started. I don't know if you remember this actually, but it was when we had that PE class first period, like that year that we always reference because it's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I asked you, I was like, dude, I really want to learn this ska song, and I can't figure it out by ear. Like, can you try to do it? And you're like, yeah, okay, man. And then you came back the next day or a couple days later or whatever with like a lead sheet.
Oh,
for it
cool. I
for
don't
me.
remember that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, dude, I'll try to transcribe it for you or whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. It was like Catch-22 or something, or like Streetlight Manifesto, I think.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That vaguely sounds familiar.
Yeah. Anyway, before that, I played guitar for a tiny bit when I was like 8 or 9. My dad gave me an acoustic to try out. I broke it on accident. It fell over and like the neck literally split off. And then I tried saxophone for a little bit, and it just like didn't really happen with that. And then I took about 9 months of drum lessons actually with a guy at a Muse, a local music store. And that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, but my parents wouldn't get me a drum set.
Right.
I just had the pad. So like, I'm surprised I even stuck with it for 9 months, but just with that, because come on, a drum set to like a little practice drum pad, it's like not even close. It's like, okay, like you can only have fun doing rudiments for so long before you're like, I need a drum
marching
kit.
band snare patterns and stuff. And you want to
but I remember him specifically was teaching me like the basic drum beats for like popular styles of music. Like we learned like a basic like disco kind of thing, like a reggae, and like a 4 on the floor like rock beat or whatever. It was really fun. But then that stopped. I got over it, and then a few years later, now I'm in high school, and I started dating this girl that was like a year or two older than me. She was like a sophomore or a junior or whatever. And she had this beat up little Squire Strat in the corner of her room when I went over there one day. And I just was like, can I borrow that? I don't know, like with Impulse just kind of took over. Like, I don't know, but like I love music. I just was so in love with music. I think I just wanted to be closer to it and like have more involvement with it. So I borrowed her guitar and just started teaching myself like Misfits songs and like Bad Religion tunes.
That's so cool.
So that's probably around the time I asked you to transcribe that ska thing.
Right.
And then a close mutual friend of all of ours, studio session bass player extraordinaire Matt Dennis, we had been playing in bands on and off through high school, one of which I helped them start and then promptly quit because I was like, some of the guys were a little bit better than me, and I just was feeling so self-conscious. I was like, I suck. Like I need to I need to go practice or whatever. And then Matt and I started playing again a few years later, starting like a kind of like metal, hardcore, like punk thing.
So you guys grow up best friends or really good friends, both loving music. You go off to high school. You're 4 years younger, so obviously you're not in high school at the same time as each other.
Yeah.
When did the like drift of what you guys were doing, like hanging out and playing music and being friends, when did that start?
I'd say like the drift away or the drift
Yeah,
back?
because I think you had told me pre-interview that there was a point where you guys like stopped hanging out quite as much, right?
Probably when I hit high school and like Blake graduated high school.
Yeah, because like by the time I graduated high school, Stuart was just starting.
Gotcha.
So I was
right,
making my moves, like trying to go to college. I was, you know what I mean? It's like the age difference at that age is like kind of significant.
For sure.
You know what I mean? From
Yeah.
like 18 to 13 or 20 to like 15, it's like dramatically different worlds.
Right.
And we didn't really reconnect again. It was like a 10-year lapse
Wow.
or so.
Yeah.
So what happened in that 10-year gap?
Well, I went to high school and everything, and I started to, play music more seriously. But after a while, I started to kind of drift away into like the party scene and getting involved with drugs, substances, and stuff like that. And it kind of detracted from like the music I wanted to create. And I was still able to do cool things. Like I was able to like go with the Young Americans and like travel around the world. And it's a performing arts group based in Los Angeles. So I was able to do that. I was able to travel the world and everything. But every time I'd come back, I would dive right back into the party scene. And it felt like I never left. Like I would take a break and then you come back. It's like, oh, I never left. And that eventually began to take over and progress and become even worse than ever. And I was eventually wrapped in the throes of addiction, and then I was able to get sober when I was 22. And around that time, maybe like a year later, I started to play music, and I reached out to Blake because we were both living in Highland Park over in Northeast Los Angeles. We kind of all gravitated towards that area. There's a great art scene out there. There's a great music scene out in the Northeast LA area. And I needed a bass player on a gig, and my mom was like, "You should hit up Blake. You know, he's playing music out there. Why don't you call Blake?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do it for sure." And I just hit him up randomly about a gig, and he's like, "I'll do it."
Yeah, no, it was kind of crazy because, as Stuart said, we separated because of our age and like high school, me going off to college and all that kind of stuff. But our families stayed pretty tight.
I was going to ask you that, so I'm sure you'd hear stories from your parents.
Exactly.
What was going on.
So like I'd hear things from my mom. Oh yeah, I talked to Tony, Stuart's mother, and it doesn't sound like he's doing that well. And I'm like, oh man, like it's such a bummer, like every time I'd hear something bad, it was just like, oh, that sucks, And then there was kind of like it was like the dark ages. Like I didn't hear anything for a little while, but then I started hearing like good news. Like, oh yeah, Stuart like got sober and got a job, and oh he's playing music again, and like everything was like slowly like incrementally getting better. I was like, oh okay, cool, right on. And then I moved to Highland Park. Right, and then you hit me up for this gig, like, hey man, my bass player is out of town or whatever. We have this gig in like West Adams. Can you come through and sub for him? And I'm like, absolutely, like hell yeah, that was so much fun. Because Stuart did have Hand Drum Maps started before I joined, So there was like a first era of like Hand Drum Maps. I think we're like fully in the second or third era of
iteration of the band
of this group now.
Sure,
definitely.
Yeah, but that was really how we reconnected. I mean, it was after a pretty long period of not really seeing or talking to each other very much. I moved in around the corner from his house. Like I could have walked there in like 10 minutes,
Right.
So it was like, I don't know, the universe kind of works in mysterious ways sometimes, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to ask you, Stuart, on the topic of some of the lyrical darkness that are in these songs.
Yeah.
And also one of the things that I love so much about these songs is that there is just an immediate honesty in the lyric. I mean, it's, like you can tell this is someone's experience. This isn't some fabricated story or something that you made up. But so did substance use and partying. I'm guessing, so like you said, it started as partying and then became this like darker descent into something that you didn't have control over.
Yes.
And kind of lost control. And what was that? Were you playing music through that process, or did it slow down? Like when did you feel like you just totally spun out?
That's a great question. The lyrical honesty that is so important in songs. You can listen to a song and you can tell if the lyrics aren't honest just from a listener's standpoint. You know what I'm saying? When I write, I think lyrical honesty and vulnerability is so important with making a great song. But with my addiction and everything that happened to me in my life, it started out as normal partying when I was a kid. I'm having beers at a party. I smoke a lot of weed every day, and slowly it started to progress because addiction is progressive. And that's what happened to me in those ways. And eventually, like throughout the course of my life, I was smoking weed, then I was taking ecstasy, then I was taking psychedelics, and now I'm kind of taking pain pills, and now I'm into heroin, and now I'm into meth and all that stuff. And that's kind of the progression of where my story took me. And I was playing music throughout all of that, but by the end of my addiction, I was starting to pawn my guitars, and I was starting to get rid of all my equipment, and I'm just trying to obtain more money so I can purchase more drugs. And eventually I had to take a look at myself, and it really progressed to a point where I was homeless. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any friends or any family backing me. And I remember I was in downtown LA and I stumbled across like some guys playing some acoustic music at a little street fair. And I was with some guy I was spending time with, using drugs with, and I looked over at him and I was like, hey, I used to do that. I used to play guitar and sing, and I used to have musical equipment. And the guy's just like, yeah, sure you did, bro. Like, I'm like, no, I swear, I used to be a musician. And that really kind of caused me to like step back and take a look at my own life. So
yeah, it gives me the chills, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, like a punch to the gut.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, damn, you don't even believe me. Like, holy crap, I used to have this whole other life I was living. Like,
yeah, you're almost like looking from the outside in at that of something you used to have.
Weird mirror sort of thing going on.
Yeah, and like that's just one of the many occurrences that kind of led like a staircase to me getting sober in the end, you know? Like all these little gut punches or God shots, whatever you want to call them. Like those all led me down the same road to where I am today.
Hey, hold on, just real quick. Is a God shot? Is that something from the AA like literature?
Yeah. Well, like it's kind of like a cliche.
Uh-huh.
Like there's like a lot of cliches, like keep coming back or like whatever you want to say. But
Uh-huh.
I was involved in the program like a lot, like throughout my treatment center days.
Right.
And so a God shot is something like that happens out in the streets that kind of causes you to
The universe giving you some big old sign.
a moment of clarity, if you will, you know?
Sure.
That's a cool phrase to say that.
Yeah,
It's
that
a-
is.
It's a yeah, I like that.
So reliving some of these dark times through your lyrics then, like when you're writing and being vulnerable, is it painful ever, therapeutic? Is it kind of a combination?
It's definitely a combination of both because I kind of try to soul search and dig deep, and like I sometimes just get hit with memories when I'm sleeping or something, and I'm like, you know, that'd be a great story to tell. Like maybe someone could get something out of that. Like I try not to write just stuff that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
or like make up stories. You know, I don't need to make up any stories. I have enough stories to last a lifetime, but I try to always approach it from like a place of honesty and vulnerability, and sometimes it is hard to like write those lyrics. Like even on our new record we have a song called Hollywood and Vine, and it talks about kind of being in the throes of addiction and you know the feeling of the rush when you finally get something, and then like the feeling of the pain when you don't have it, you know?
Right. Do you ever also feel like, because it was a snapshot in time, and I mean, how long would you say that period was that you're usually drawing from, of like homelessness, loneliness, desperation, drug addiction?
I mean, this all happened from the time I was around 19 to 22. So it was a very short period of time where a
Right.
lot happened.
So are you ever worried that well would run dry, or do you have so much inspiration from that time period, specifically for this band, just because it's so lyrically driven by that time period?
Yeah. I feel like the well could never run dry because I felt like every day was an experience. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I remember things that, you know, I was in a haze or whatever and crazy stuff happened. And I sometimes like grab onto those memories and stuff. And it is painful to write those things down. And it's crazy to write about myself, like, and that life I used to have. It almost comes down to like the Eminem and the Slim Shady, like the alternate personas and stuff, because I was really into hip hop
Right.
for a long time, you know, and he would write about himself from like another lifetime ago, and it almost feels like that in a way. Like I'm not this person anymore, but I used to be.
It's like an alter ego you have or had.
Almost, yeah. And in a way, it's like a way for this old Stuart to somehow live on, you know, and this old version of myself to live on, and not to romanticize anything about it. You know, it kind of all comes down to the same message. Like it's almost like hope through struggle. You know what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
like kind of like the brand. That's kind of like the message behind all the lyrics. It's like there's hope, but you know this was a struggle in my life, but you know I'm on the other side of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and a reminder that like it was horrible and like to never want to go back there.
Exactly.
too, you know?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I always remember that. I always remember the pain that I hold on to, because part of me, like when I was in my early recovery or early newly sober, like, I would sometimes be like, oh, I miss these moments, you know, and always my mind would always go back to the time where I was on top, you know, I had the drugs in my hand and I was partying, I was doing great, but then my mind would always like forget all the pain and all the terrible times that happened. And I feel like the shift in my sanity, almost, if you will, is starting to draw from the painful times and kind of forget about the good times, because in comparison, the horrible times were just so much greater than the good times in every way.
Sure.
And that's part of my addictive mind that always goes to the good. But part of my restoration of my mind and my life is to kind of draw from the bad now and kind of understand that's where that goes. That's where that path leads.
Right. That's like the therapeutic part.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So just one more sort of lyric question or questions for you, and then we'll launch a little bit more into the music and sort of your role, Blake, and how you work with Stuart on these songs. But some of these lyrics are so interesting and so vivid that I went ahead and just like printed out a couple that I thought, you know, they speak to me and or I just wonder more specifically, like where you were when this happened, like what was going through your mind.
Yeah.
So here's one that we're actually currently working on. For those that are listening, I'm also a producer for these guys, and we worked on a previous EP, and we're currently in the studio working on their follow-up. But this is the song I'm Feeling Something. And I remember when I first heard this lyric, I asked you, because we were on a Zoom call just sort of chatting about what the vibe was going to be for this, and I like immediately stopped when I heard this and said, whoa, what is that lyric? So correct me if I'm wrong, because I think this is what it is. With a butterfly knife and a baseball bat and a sign from your mother asking where you're at. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
So vivid, and so, yeah, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. At that time in my addiction, this is the tail end. Like, you remember when we were talking about God shots a few minutes ago? Mm-hmm. This was a total God shot for me. My mother was trying to get a hold of me. You know, I was always running around and nothing can really stop a parent's love from even addiction, no matter what. Like, your parents still love you no matter what. Like, even if you're struggling with addiction right now and you're listening to this, like, you still have family that loves you and like wants to see you do well. And I was always getting messages from my mom being like, are you ready to kind of take this next step and go to treatment, like get off the streets and do that? And I'd be like, I'd always ignore them, like routinely. And by the end of my addiction, I found this drug dealer in Inglewood. You know, we had a rapport going on, and I ended up breaking into his car and robbing his car of like 45 balloons or something, which is like, it's a lot of money. Those are each go for $60 a pop. I robbed him.
Balloon of drugs.
Of heroin, yeah.
Heroin, yeah. So
heroin comes in balloons when it's stored and packaged and sent out and stuff. And I robbed this dude's car, and he knew it was me. And I had nowhere to go, and all I had on me was a butterfly knife that I stole from my brother. And it was like an old butterfly knife that he used to like mess around with and stuff. And I'm like, all right, and a Dodgers small baseball bat that I got at a game when I was a kid. And that's all I had to defend myself. And I was getting messages from people being like, you know, this guy's looking for you. Like, and he's going to take you out. Like, and I was like, Jesus, you know?
Again, that just gave me the chills, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What a moment in time.
Yeah. And I had to get out of, I was living in Inglewood at the time, and like out of downtown LA, Inglewood, kind of going through there. And that kind of drove me back to the South Bay. To kind of escape that and to kind of protect myself, because you know I wasn't a tough guy when I was using. You know, like I robbed this guy. I just stole all his stuff and and ran away. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with that. These guys were involved with gangs and stuff like that. I didn't want anything to do with it, so I just ran back to the South Bay to try to get away from that and escape that.
Wow. Surprise for you, he's actually here today.
And here he is.
Maury,
It's Maury.
Jerry.
He pulls out the baseball bat.
You are the father.
That
Dude,
is so
the
tight.
Dodgers mini bat, the classic street defense weapon of Los
Absolutely.
Angeles. That's so funny, dude.
So, guys, this band is a collaborative effort, and we haven't heard much from you yet, Blake. But
Yeah.
I always imagine that your role in this, I'm sure you help lyrically, and I want to hear your take on it. But I've always imagined that it's like almost acting as a producer pre-hitting the studio, like as another filter that actually helps with arrangements and like just sorting out sections. And just tell me what your experience is like working with Stuart.
You pretty much nailed it right there. I mean, Stuart and I feel like my role is largely like an editor's role or like an arranger, co-arranger. Stuart often will have like a lot of the seeds or like bulk material, and then he'll come to me with a riff or come to me with this or that, a verse, chorus, or whatever. We'll jam on it, let the parts try to work themselves out, come up with early demos. But then like right away from the beginning, I already have my like arranger's like editor's mind turned on, where it's like, hey, like just super, it could be anything super small, like, hey, let's just try to rework those lyrics a little bit right there, like that doesn't seem to work, or coming up with counter melodies, coming up with new sections, coming up with augmenting the chord progression slightly, just to like, I don't know, because Stuart and I actually are aesthetically like so on the same page.
Right.
So like, as we're going through stuff, I feel like a really big sense of freedom to just like, take whatever he gives me and just start like running with it, because I'm pretty sure that he's gonna like it, and if he doesn't, he'll say something. And then, but we're still on the same page like every step of the way. So it's really cool to to be in a situation where, I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a luxury where like I'm not the one who has to be personally vulnerable in this band as much, because I'm like the lyrical material is largely coming from Stuart's, some of those experiences he was talking about.
Totally. So before we switch into your guys' inspiration playlist that you brought in, I guess the last question I wanted to ask is just how is this upcoming EP different from the first?
I feel like the first EP we did, those 4 songs were so ready to go. Like me and Blake had them crystally polished, kind of like, here you go, Steve. Let's do this exact thing on here.
Yep.
And we ended up tweaking some stuff, adding some stuff, and like kind of had a lot of studio magic on that first EP. But with this next round of songs, I felt like had a little more rawness to it, and kind of didn't have all the parts there, didn't have everything going. I mean, we still make kind of quality demos and like kind of have the arrangements there, but we had some certain parts when we were getting in here, like in Feeling Something. We were like, I don't know what's going to happen here, or like, some of them didn't feel right completely. And then we had the goal of coming here and making them right.
Yeah, I agree. Like as you said earlier about us kind of having our demos like pretty fleshed out beforehand, I have a hard time. I have a contradictory thing in my head about that. It's like, it's good to have it. Like if the ideas are working themselves out beforehand, then that's great. Like get them on the demo, come to the studio, like, crystallize them in like a better sounding way, and let's put that on the record just like as it is. But I also like to leave room for like chance, for new ideas to come on, because you're such a good sounding board for us as well, Steve. So I like coming here and having a little bit of flexibility of like, I think we know what we want, but like, let's, decide together, because Stuart and I do so much of the pre-work. It's nice to come in and like, okay, we're like in a new creative space. We have another person here. Let's see like if something's going to be taken to the next level or something surprising comes up, because who knows, like that could be way better than something we had planned out before.
Totally.
I don't want things to be so pre-planned. Just only enough so that things are going well.
Yeah.
And
sure.
then after that, kind of like, all right, let's leave it to chance. Like let's leave room for some magic.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So you guys brought in this inspiration playlist today of a handful of songs. We're not going to get to all of them, but if you guys are interested, those that are listening, when this airs on Spotify, there will be a playlist of all of the tunes that they picked. And I'm guessing the overall, like you said from the beginning of the show, the overall idea and vibe of this list is not like stuff that we listened to when we were kids, but more so things that you've been listening to that are inspiring you currently, correct?
Exactly.
Well, let's start with the first song that we have on the list. This tune is called Balloon, and it is by a band called Crumb.
I'll be your guide.
That was Balloon by Crumb. What a great song. So who picked that out of the two of you guys? Or is that a communal choice?
I picked that one just because well, I heard this. Our favorite producer, one of our favorite producers, besides Steve,
It's all
is
right.
this guy
Butter me
named
up.
Jonathan Rado, and he's behind a lot of bands that could have been on this list. Whitney,
Foxygen, Lemon Twigs.
yeah, he's behind
Yeah.
all of that. And I remember seeing on his Instagram maybe 6 months ago or like a year ago, he was like, "Hey, I'm producing this band called Crumb or something," and I didn't really think about it. Then he kind of posted about it again. I was like, "Who are these guys?" You know? And then their KEXP live session came out, and I was completely blown away. And by this track specifically is the one they opened up with, and I've been really inspired by that sound, and kind of have been leaning more towards synth sounds ever since then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that sort of the swirliness and how some of the pads are moving around, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
Complements her voice.
Yeah, that main synth thing in the verses that it's just like has this very slow modulation going on it. The next band is the Arcs. The song's called Velvet Ditch, and Jonathan Rado was tight with Richard Swift, who has now since passed away, R.I.P. But the Arcs is basically a project between Richard Swift and Dan Auerbach of the
Right.
Black Keys, plus a couple other guys. This whole sound of this record, Yours Dreamily, is like a huge sonic influence for me.
Yeah, and highly inspiring to me as well.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, you guys turn me on to this. I love the sound of it. Let's give it a listen. This is Velvet Ditch by the Arcs.
Forever stuck in Mississippi, 'cause Mississippi stuck in me. I don't want no other cities, just magnolia trees, if you please. I'm a pilgrim and a stranger. That don't make no never mind. Want the velvet ditch to roll me till the end of time. It'll be just fine. Wanna float on down the river on a cloud of cotton dreams. Pour some drink for Mr. Junior. Drink all night for free, never leave. I'm a pilgrim and a stranger. That don't make no never mind. Want the velvet ditch to roll me till the end of time. It'll be just fine. I'm a pilgrim and a stranger. That don't make no never mind. Want the velvet ditch to roll me till the end of time. It'll be just fine.
Velvet Ditch, the Arcs. We were talking, while that was playing, there's something so nostalgic sounding about that. that it makes me want to go out and like buy that on vinyl. And then we were just sort of having this like little conversation about how just, I don't know, how that doesn't really exist so much these days. I mean, I guess it does for some people, and there is like this revival thing coming back. But
Yeah.
the three of us all, at least you and I, Blake, grew up when vinyl was still super popular. I mean, CDs were out, but they hadn't like really caught on yet, like late 80s, early 90s. You know, cassettes were out, but like, you know, that was
Yeah.
more of a convenience thing. It never sounded good.
Right. Well, you mentioned the experience of just like you said you know your parents took you to the record shop and just turned you loose in the place, and you came back with the Rolling Stones record. I mean, I used to do that even when CDs were popular. My grandma would take me to Best Buy
Yeah.
and just go, hey, I want to grab a CD. I want to grab some new music. Okay, cool. Like, go. Just pick whatever, you know? And even that experience is dead. You know what I mean? Of just
Yeah.
going and like discovering some random stuff. Obviously, yeah, like you said, there's a resurgence of people doing that, and there's a couple amazing record shops across LA, obviously. Notable mention, since we are being broadcast in Long Beach, Fingerprints, shout out to the guys there. So it's just an amazing place to hang out.
This next song that they're gonna play is a band that actually I picked out. It's a band called The Clockworks. They're relatively unknown. They're from the UK or Ireland. I think they're from Ireland actually. And I was on the Instagram of the band Oasis. Their old manager fell in love with these guys, and I just saw them randomly in one of his Instagram posts and fell in love with this band. And this song's called Enough Is Never Enough.
It was a Tuesday, and it was bleak. Drawn from the wreckage of a broken home, only knows the love that he was shown. He barges into a cafe he owns to bark marching orders of poor kitchen porters, fresh from the microwave. A sandwich is thrown on a chip plate. The kitchen's in a state. There's no need for pruning when business is blooming. His grandmother was a proud Filipino. Slips his mind as he dips his toes into the world of a well-known racist who explains it all in words he knows. These fingers were made for pointing. Now these fingers were made for pointing. These fingers were made for pointing. These fingers were made to point. And enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. The busker boys chasing their dream by the beggar with the card machine. And passing by a suit and tie won't cost an eye. Too fixated on the screen. And blessed are the meek, I've heard them say, but honestly, there's no romance in poverty when dinner is a novelty. These fingers were made for pointing. These fingers were made for pointing. These fingers were made for pointing. These fingers were made to point. And enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. No, enough is never enough. Oh, enough is never enough. Trudging always streets alone. I can't help thinking not to blame. Romantic are instead and gone. It's with O'Leary on the plane. Everybody loves to bitch. Infections speak louder than hurt. When rags to riches turns rags to witches. Fine fellas are made for birds. These fingers were made for pointing.
That was Enough Is Never Enough by The Clockworks.
With this band, I love this dude's imagery in his lyrics and like the kind of honesty behind it. And he kind of writes about the underbelly of the UK, like kind of similar to like where I write about the underbelly of living in Los Angeles and stuff. So I really related to this and really fell in love with this band. And they're just so unknown. They have like 15,000 followers on Instagram or whatever, doing mini tours over in the UK. Maybe have come to the States once or were trying to come to the States once on a tour, and it was like the pandemic, so it kind of got
Right.
delayed. But I always wanted to maybe play a show with these guys when they come out, and they've been like a big influence on me since I heard them a couple years ago.
Shall we move along to the to this
Yeah.
next song?
Let's do it.
Blake, I'm gonna let you. Is this your pick?
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you intro it because I can't pronounce either of
Okay.
these and I'll mess it up.
Yeah, well, Krungbin, everyone by now knows Krungbin because they have just blown up the last couple of years. They are from Houston, Texas. They're a trio, guitar, bass, and drums. Some of the best to ever do it. I see why they've gotten so popular. They're largely an instrumental band, although they have now written some songs and released some songs that do have vocals. And the guitarist, Mark Spear, is a huge influence of mine. If anyone listens to the new Hand Drawn Map stuff after this has come out, they'll see there's some direct influence, and I don't mind that at all because the guy just shreds. He's
That's
so
awesome.
good. I love their whole sound world that they create.
So this track we're gonna listen to is called Pelota. Here it is.
Soy una pelota de hoy. Yo estaba perdido en una casa surreal. Me convertí en un demonio. Quien tuve una semilla, no sabía fue arrancada por la ayuda de mi familia. Ahorita yo puedo ser una pelota. 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 Ay, yo quiero ser pura vera. Pero quiero amar el desastre que es mío. Yo quiero acabar, encontrar el camino. Y después no quiero entrar, no quiero correr de este paseo. Y después no quiero entrar, no quiero correr de este paseo. Ahorita yo puedo ser una pelota. 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 Ay, yo quiero ser pura vera. Yo lo quiero amar, el desastre que es mío. Yo quiero acabar, encontrar el camino. Y después no quiero entrar, no quiero correr de este paseo. Y después no quiero entrar, no quiero correr de este paseo. Y después no quiero entrar, no quiero correr de este paseo. Y después no quiero entrar, no quiero correr de este paseo.
God, that makes me so happy. What an awesome song. That was Pelota. I will say the one thing that actually that reminds me is that some of the new tunes have like a little bit of Latin percussion in spots, and I can kind of see that being an influence on where we push that.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I feel like all the old 60s surf rock and like a lot of that stuff was kind of drawn from Spanish influence and stuff like that. And you know, growing up in LA, there's like a huge Mexican population, Salvadorian population, just a lot of Latin feel around here. And I kind of grew up around that, and I felt like we both kind of wanted to incorporate a little bit of that taste into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't super intentional, but now the song started taking shape. We had, once again, master drummer and percussionist Rob Humphreys in the studio, and he just, there's just a tool fun box full of percussion things, and
even just some of the hand claps and like some of that stuff. Right? That was-
yes, right. So in Pelota, there's that section where they're specifically doing those hand claps, which is typically drawn from like a flamenco. I mean, it happens in all different styles of music, but I think most people associate it with flamenco music. And yeah, when we were in the studio tracking, I can't remember what song it was, but we're like, what else? This needs something else here. Like, let's try a flamenco hand clap thing.
Oh,
and we went for it.
Yeah.
Effervescent Mind,
Yeah, and it works. And I think things slowly got nudged towards having some of that Latin American influence.
Absolutely. So we usually play, about 5 or 6 of the Inspiration Playlist songs, and then the additional 2 or 3 that are left wind up on the list that everyone can check out on Spotify. In this case today, the conversation was so awesome, had so much fun chatting with you guys that we only got through, a very small handful. So definitely recommend, if you're listening and you're interested in these songs that you've been hearing, to check out the Inspiration Playlist that you'll find on Spotify in a few days if you're listening on KLBP FM right now. But what are some of these other tunes that we didn't get a chance to listen to, guys?
Well, the first one is one I picked out. It was by The Strokes, easy enough. It's from their newest album, though, The New Abnormal, which was released in 2020, kind of at the height of the pandemic. And it's a song called Selfless, which, I was pretty highly influenced when it came out and just kind of blown away by the sound and everything, because Julian Casablanca is a big influence of mine, and I feel like he's one of the best songwriters in the game right now, and I just kind of had to give him a shout out on this.
Yeah, same. Strokes have always been a big influence for me. Julian Casablancas as well, so that hits. I don't know this song, actually. I haven't checked it out really, but the old stuff is amazing, and I was lucky enough to see them once a few years back. The next tune is by a band called Shannon and the Clams. I believe they're from Oakland, California. This is their most recent record, Year of the Spider. The song's called Crawl. They had their last 2 records, actually, also another throwback to Dan Auerbach, were produced by him at his studio Easy Eye Sound out in Nashville, I believe. Another honorable mention that I'm going to throw on the playlist is a guitar player called Steve Marion. He has a project called Delicate Steve. I believe he's from New Jersey and also living in LA. But he has his own solo project, called Delicate Steve. The song's called Wally Wilder, one of my favorites. He's been a big influence on me as a guitar player as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, and then the last song that we kind of came up with was a band called Real Estate, a song called Talking Backwards. And I've really been obsessed with this band since I discovered them maybe around 8-9 years ago. And all of their albums are completely kick-ass. I really fell in love with his style because he uses a lot of chorus on his guitar, and his voice is just buried in the mix. And he talks about his voice as like another instrument. And, a lot of pop music and traditional pop music, the voice is very forward. The lyrics are very understandable and easy to grasp. His are a little bit further back, almost in the style of like a shoegaze, like in a way. And I think it's really an interesting style when he doesn't focus so much on like the lyrics or like the voice, but like everything as it binds together as a whole.
Yeah. Well, that also was a choice. It seems like I remember listening to music 20, 30 years back, like the Stones and Beach Boys and stuff, some of the stuff that we talked about, like the Doors. And while the vocal was present and you could hear what he was saying, in any of those tunes, like the vocal was never mixed the way that it is in contemporary music. I mean, it sounded like someone in a band that was like fighting to cut through. And that was cool because you were like listening to it as like, this is the band with a singer that obviously has a message, but it's not like the loudest thing by a long shot. I feel like contemporary pop music is like the vocal is up here and then the band is here, which is super unnatural sounding.
Yeah.
maybe because we're all disassociating
That's
all the time.
I think you've nailed it.
And our music is now reflecting the state of our disassociation.
Exactly. As the camera zooms right in on Blake's face.
Hey, mental health is real.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
It was so much fun talking with you guys, listening to
man.
these songs. Thanks for coming on and doing this.
Dude, always a pleasure, man. Thank you for having
absolutely.
Of course. So, are you guys going to play a song for us before we call
Yes,
it?
we are.
us. Yep.
What's the name of this tune?
It's going to be on the upcoming record. It's a song called Red and Blue.
Awesome. Stoked to hear it. Here's Red and Blue, Hand-Drawn Maps.
Look into my heart, see the truth that's in my soul. Finger pointing back at me, a lie is all that's told when I'm with you. two. Feel like this inside my head. I feel sick, I can't get out of bed. Unless I get that call. No surprise, my phone won't ring at all. At all. At all. You've got me crying. I know it ain't no dream. Something in my heart just doesn't feel a thing. I see a red flag. Your lips are turning blue. Don't hate me when I ask you. I hope you brought enough for two. You've got me crying. I know it ain't no dream. Something in my heart just doesn't feel a thing. I see a red flag. Your lips are turning blue. Don't hate me when I ask you. I hope you brought enough for two.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Total Access Radio Show. We are broadcasted live on KLBP FM in Long Beach every other Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. You can also listen anytime on Spotify. Follow us on IG at Total Access Radio Show for behind-the-scene photos and information on future guests. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, Total Access Radio Show, to watch live footage from today's episode. This is Stephen Blake signing off.